Hi, I'm Callie and welcome to Kapowski Reads, and this is my May Reading Scottish wrap up. I've been reading a little bit slower of late, so I only have 3 books to talk about this week, but they were a good 3 books, so I'm pretty happy with that. First up is Paper Cup by Karen Campbell. This book was also my book club pick, so it was really fun to be able to have like a 2 hour long chat about this book. This is about Kelly, who is a homeless woman in Glasgow, and one night a very drunken bridal party come up to her and give her some money, and then the next day she wakes up and realizes that she has the bride's engagement ring. And this woman's getting married in a very short amount of time, and Kelly, being the kind-hearted, just lovely soul that she is, decides to reunite this woman with her engagement ring. And she tries really hard to get it to her. She knows the village, town that she lives in, so she tries to mail it to her, but of course without having a full address. She's pretty unsuccessful with that. So she's kind of feels like she's left with one option, and that is to travel there herself. Kelly knows this place. She's actually from the same place as the bride. They don't know each other. There's quite a big age gap there, but it kind of felt to Kelly a little bit like the fates aligning and sort of telling her it's time to go back home. And Kelly had left her hometown after a pretty traumatic event where she kind of felt like she couldn't go back, she wasn't welcome. And since then she's had a few decades of alcoholism and homelessness, and she'd always sworn that she wouldn't go back home, but it feels like it's time. A huge chunk of this book is Kelly actually travelling back home and the people she meets along the way, and it's just there's such a contrast in the people that she meets. Half of them treat her with kindness, they treat her like a human being, and half of them are awful to her and just sort of treat her like a piece of rubbish. On her way back to Dumfries and Galloway, she finds a dog. She finds a wee dog and rescues him because that dog is not being treated well at all, and she saves him and names him Collie because he's a collie dog, but she says it's short for cauliflower. And I love this dog. I absolutely loved him, and I loved the relationship that Kelly had with him. And all through the book it was just really nice seeing Kelly find herself again. I had to go and close the curtains because the sun was in my face and I couldn't see a thing. I loved Kelly as a character. She felt real, and while I completely empathized with her, I never pitied her. And she was such a strong woman, and she had dealt with so many hardships, and she just kept going. And I absolutely loved her relationship with wee collie dog. It just sort of, like, he brought the best out of her. She had been so guarded and just so, you know, oh, I don't need anybody. But the relationship that those two had, they were a wee family, and it was just so lovely to read about their interactions. I felt that because Kelly is very guarded, she found it really hard to trust people, and I feel like that is the reason that she had survived on the streets for so long. And every time she met a new person along the way, I was just so worried for her that this was going to be a bad person, that she was going to get hurt, and I just didn't want her to get hurt. I really liked her, and I thought it was just so lovely that she was going on this journey to reunite this woman with her engagement ring because it meant something to her. And it was hard for Kelly to go back. And I wonder if she would have returned the engagement ring if she wasn't from the same place as this woman. And I don't think she would have. Maybe she would. And this book also had a whole bunch of side characters that I really enjoyed. There was a man who ran a shelter, and he was almost like, he had this demeanor of like a wannabe gangster, but he had a heart of gold and he wasn't a gangster at all. He just had this reputation that was completely unwarranted. And there were the other occupants of this shelter, and their interactions really just brought some comedy relief, and I really enjoyed this book. I did find it difficult to read at points. There were a few points that I had to check with the others to just, in my group, to be like, if this is what's going to happen, I'm not reading it. And that wasn't what was going to happen. But I had the fear. I had the fear that bad times were going to come. And I felt like I couldn't trust anybody. But I really enjoyed this book. It was heartbreaking. It was moving. But it also was a little bit of a love letter to the nature of Scotland. She was walking for quite a part of her journey, and it was really just quite beautiful hearing about the scenery that she was going through. I haven't spent a lot of time in Dumfries and Galloway, so I'm not super familiar with the location, but you could tell that the author was, and my friends who also read it that are from around that part of Scotland, they said that it shone, that it really it captured Dumfries and Galloway really well. It was a really enjoyable read with such a lovable protagonist. I really enjoyed it. And the next book that I read was a teeny tiny book. Teeny tiny. It's Watch Your Language by Kat Connolly. This is a book of poetry, all written in spoken word in Scots. I actually followed this author on Instagram and sort of saw their post, their sort of positivity, and I thought that I really liked the content that they gave there, and there were little extracts of, you know, some of her poetry, and it sounded really good, so I had to get the book. And a few of my friends have read this too, and it came highly recommended. So this is a collection of 16 poems that are all sort of around mental health and social issues, and I thought that it was such a powerful collection of poems. And not only is the book poetry, but it's also got some artwork in it too, so lots of gorgeous pieces of art that the author has done themselves. And I really enjoyed this because the author is from the south side of Glasgow, which is an area that I'm really familiar with, and a lot of the sort of social issues that she's talking about in her poetry really resonated with me, and I just thought it was so impactful a collection. But just because the poems were surrounding mental health, they weren't all, you know, sad. They were entertaining, and I really enjoyed this collection, and I will be looking for more poems by this author because I would like to get more of their work. I really liked it. I am keeping my eyes open for more poetry written in Scots because I really enjoyed this collection and I am keen to read more. Just a wee review on that one because there's only so much I can say. I don't want to ruin the poems for anybody, but I do wholeheartedly recommend it. And the last book that I read was Oh Marina Girl by Graham Leroney. This book came to me recommended by Kirkland Ciccone, who is the author of Happiness is Wasted on Me and Glow Glass, and he had said that this book was weird and that not enough people are talking about it, and I am inclined to agree wholeheartedly. This book all surrounds a man who works in a newspaper. His job is to open the letters that come in, publish the letters in the newspaper, so like the comments page. And one day he opens a letter and it's not good. It's not a good letter. The letter references a previous letter published in this newspaper in support of a novel. And this new writer has kidnapped the author of the previous letter. and they are threatening violence against this man if the newspaper does not publish their letter and make a promise not to publish any more correspondence that are pro this book. So naturally, the wee man who's opened this letter is a little bit scared. He doesn't want an innocent person to be harmed, and he just doesn't know what to do because the letter that he's received clearly says do not go to the police. So what's a guy to do? And then what happens is just a whole bunch of strangeness. This book was so weird, but like in a good way. I really enjoyed it. I need to be careful not to give a spoiler because there's a huge bit that's revealed quite early on, but if I tell you it now, I might ruin that enjoyment, and that was a really juicy reveal to get. So all the while, our unnamed protagonist is trying to find out who has sent this letter and to stop this innocent person from being harmed. And I know you're wondering, how does he know he's innocent? He knows. He knows why he's innocent. And there are all of these characters who just keep popping up, and the book is just unreliable narrator. I read this book and I know what happened, but I also feel like I don't know what happened. Was any of it real? And if so, how much of it? Because there were things that definitely didn't happen, but I don't know what things those were. This was such a very odd yet enjoyable book. It reminded me a little bit of Piranesi with regards to the main character and how I couldn't trust them, even though it felt like they had given me no reason not to trust them. But all of these other factors were happening that I just felt like I didn't know. I knew I couldn't trust somebody, so I just didn't trust anybody. This is also a book that I think I want to go back and read it and tab it because there are so many clever quotes and musings that I feel like this book is such a gem that not enough people are talking about this. And I think I need people to talk about this book because I want to talk about this book. So yes, I highly recommend Oh Marina Girl. It is just such a wild ride of a book, and you will finish it and not be 100% sure what you've just read, but like in the best kind of way. In addition to the kidnapping, it's also like fear of a militant group in the city. It takes place in Glasgow, and it takes place in a version of Glasgow that I don't feel is our version of Glasgow, and I was struggling to try and get the timeline of the book, and I think it's set around 2003-4, that kind of period, but it just didn't feel like the Glasgow I knew of that time. In addition to our protagonist being a little bit of an odd duck, but he lives in a very, very set routine. Like a routine that I think you need to put a lot of planning into. You need to pay attention to your fibre content. He was regimented. And then he meets all of these other characters while he's looking into this letter and the kidnapper. And all of these characters just feel almost like caricatures, but like in the best way. And it's one of those books that I thought about this book for a really long time after I finished it. And I really want to read it again. And I think I'm just gonna, every time I read it, I'm gonna get a new thing out of it. But this is such an underrated book, and more people need to read it. And then we can talk about it together. There were twists and turns galore, and I had expectations. None of them happened. But I was just so convinced that certain things were going to happen, and I was wrong. And I really like when that happens. I don't want to guess what's going to happen in your book, but I thoroughly recommend. This was my favourite of my Scottish fictions. I think it has to be. My favourite Scottish read this month was Oh Marina Girl. Really, really enjoyable, really tense, and such a quick read too. It's not a big book. It's only about 160 pages, so a really quick read, but a really good read, and such a mind-bending one as well. I highly recommend. So those were my 3 books, and they were all really enjoyable in very different ways. I had ones that made me laugh, so these 2 made me chuckle. I had ones that made me cry, these ones. And I had ones that really made me think, which is all of them. They all made me think for various different reasons. So a very successful reading month for me and Scottish fiction. If you've read anything excellent recently, I would love to know. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!